Hilary. I'm a digital consultant, digital project manager, digital creative person. And what I do is across a range of projects. I work with mostly within the mainstream media industry. My background's both at the Beeb and at Channel 4, so really massive broadcasters. And then recently as a consultant I've been working with smaller companies ranging from publishers, actually not so small publishers, also charities and digital agencies. And what I'm going to try and talk through today is just some things I've learned. This is drawing mainly on the work with broadcasters, and so some of it might sound specific to telly, but really I think a lot of the lessons are pretty universal, certainly from what I've seen so far. Now you're all very, very smart people, so I'm not going to do the first bit of my talk. I'm really hoping I hit those slides and it's worked. Other than the headline, which is the internet has changed how we watch telly. Duh. We know. This we know. We don't need to dwell on it. And because I'm trying to keep this short, because we said sort of about 10-15 minutes. So these are a couple of headlines, things that I talk about when I go and talk to TV organisations, when I also go and talk to publishers and anybody else who's a big media organisation who are trying to wrestle with the challenges of how you use the new tools we have and where the hell has your audience gone. So some lessons, basically. So social is not new, but it's important. We've always been social creatures. We're hardwired for it. We're absolutely hardwired to socialise. The social tools that we have at our disposal now as audiences, but also as distributors of content, creators of content, are new tools for expressing that sociability. So harness your inner social being when you're working within story. And it relates directly to the next point, which is telling and sharing stories creates a sense of identity and culture. So stories are at the heart of everything we do. Miles is absolutely right. We will follow characters wherever they go. What we want are deep and engaging stories, because the stories that we tell ourselves about how we are today and who we are today, and the stories we tell each other about who we are as a group, and the stories we tell each other about who we are as a company or as a city or as a nation, are all about developing a sense of culture, about developing a sense of us. And this used to be part of this one-to-many broadcast model. So TV and film and books and all of these ways of communicating stories used to be from one organisation out to everybody else. But now, as audiences and as content creators, we are sharing those stories between ourselves, between each other, and sharing them back with the broadcaster. So that we are creating an enormous sense of culture and senses of identity. And it's important to recognise that. It's important to understand that, because it resonates absolutely with who we feel we are as individuals and as part of something greater. And when you think about it in terms of like that, you're thinking about it in terms of feelings, of how people feel. And how people feel within something, which I'll come back to later. And again, reinventing the shared sofa. So an awful lot of activity that we do in the digital commissioning space, certainly for TV, is absolutely recognising the first point, which is we used to watch telly together. Everybody sat down and watched that one programme that had been circled in the Radio Times because you didn't have a choice. And you sat together on the sofa and you watched telly together. And now we have Facebook and Twitter and SMS and email to enable us to have that sense of a shared sofa, where even in a culture where now we have an increasing number of single-person households, you can still sit and watch telly with your mates. They're just not in the same room. They might not even be in the same town, but the chances are you're watching the same thing and swapping stories about it. It's sort of anecdotally, it's one of the really interesting challenges around two-screen TV. We understand now that significant numbers of the audience are watching TV with another device in their hands or on their laps. The big challenge is it's a rare thing for those people to be using those devices for anything connected with the telly programme that they're watching. They're most usually using it to shop, check their emails, whatever, mess around. So there's a big challenge in that. Public-private conversations is sort of my health warning, which I probably don't need to give you guys, but it's on the slide. So you're going to get it, which is that all of this sort of activity, this burgeoning activity we have of people talking, they're not necessarily talking to you, one, as a broadcaster or as a content owner. And there are some serious mistakes and some really very ruby red faces have come about because a content owner has piled into a conversation that wasn't intended for them. So it's about being aware. It's about having good manners, actually, about the etiquette of participating in an interactive space. And then the final one is playing games. So we know about the games industry. We know that we have this massive, exciting, burgeoning games industry and that people are playing games like never before. What is more not more interesting, different kind of interesting, comes from partly from some ethnographic research that took place while I was at Channel 4. It was actually based around £1 Million Drop, which is how to play along, and it was sort of investigating why some people were playing along, why many people weren't, and what people were doing when they were playing along. It was kind of user testing, but sitting in people's living rooms. And one of the most fascinating insights that came out of that was that people are playing games. Most people are playing games when they're watching TV, not necessarily just game shows, but they're games that they're making up on the spot, and they're social games that they're playing with the people in the room with them. Often. There were examples of people actually laying down cash money on the table, on the coffee table in the living room while they were watching a game show because they were placing bets with each other on the colour of the next contestant's dress. They're betting on the outcome of a Poirot or another murder mystery. They're they're playing drinking games around CSI or other procedural police dramas are available. So there's some really interesting, playful, enjoyable behaviour to be aware of around content and see if you can tap into. You can't always, but it's useful to have a go. It's certainly useful to know it's there. So I can't do a slide about digital media without a cat. And this is all of this sort of activity. It creates enormous expectations amongst the people formerly known as the audience. And in a tight nutshell, this is what they are. There are many, many expectations. But it used to be that the BBC was sort of a revered auntie organisation, likewise any other broadcaster. And for some people, they are still quite exciting beasts. But now our audiences are more demanding. They have higher expectations of us. They want content across any screen that they choose. So this might be VOD content, as Mars was talking about. Certainly, absolutely, we're seeing that behaviour. But it's also any other content, the web content that you have, the TV listings, the book that you bought. They want it across any screen that they choose, at any time that they choose to watch, and you can exchange watch for read, interact, play, whatever. So the linearness, people will still sit down and watch a linear programme. People will still very much engage in event TV and stuff that's exciting, and you've got to watch. There are some things that you've just got to watch when they're broadcast. X Factor Final is one of them. You're not going to bother Sky Plusing X Factor Final and sitting down 2 days later to watch it. The cover's blown. You know who's won. They're probably at number 1 already. So there are some, there are some variations, but definitely, but that's them choosing to watch at that point, not because you decided that it's scheduled at whatever time on a Friday. And more than that, they want producers and broadcasters, and so now they understand that the broadcaster isn't necessarily the person who made the programme. They want them accountable, open, responsive, and friendly. So no longer this great big monolithic organisation. They want you to be accessible. They want, and I would say this for any content owner, they want to be able to get in touch and have a human conversation. So this leaves us with some really difficult nuts to crack. And, we're all having a go. It's what we're all here for. And a lot of this because we're working in a creative field, in fields of innovation. These are nuts that we will continue to try cracking. These are things that people will continue working on. So creative is obviously always going to be possibly the biggest challenge. Finding ways of telling stories, be they fiction, non-fiction, across many, many platforms. There's the stories that have depth and character and strong narrative arcs, stories that resonate, that reach out to us. They're always going to be a huge challenge. Workflow is a really big challenge. It's one thing to transform an organisation into an agile organisation when you're creating a product, but when that product is a film or a TV show, there are some things that necessarily at the moment still come in a linear format, that still happen in a linear way. And there are lots and lots of moving parts because you have producers are creating TV series for broadcasters that have to go through a compliance process in order to get into the broadcaster, in order to be able to be played out. Therefore, they have to be delivered at a certain point in time. Therefore, the script has to be honed at a particular point in time, way, way, way in advance. Therefore, you've got to have all your people on board in time. So there are some really, really interesting and challenging things about workflow when you're working with TV, especially when you're trying to marry that up with any kind of agile digital process along that, which relates directly to skills, roles, and responsibilities. So understanding who does what. There was a really interesting thing we came up against on a project I worked on at Channel 4 with a big and very successful TV producer, where I was trying to introduce them to a digital team and trying to embed somebody within their organisation who could help us to deliver the interactive project. And they were having a real problem accepting this. And I couldn't understand what the problem was. We were really struggling, and it came down to, at the end of the day, it was the job title of the person I was trying to embed. Because their understanding of what a producer was different to my understanding of what a producer was and what their roles and responsibilities were. And in a TV production setting, the producer is God for the duration of that production model. And if I'm parachuting in somebody else who's the digital producer, where the hell do they sit in the hierarchy? This nearly broke the project. So it's actually, it's tiny, it sounds petty, but it's really key, because going back to my thing about resonance and feelings, is that this is how people feel about their work. So trying to innovate in this space and trying to introduce sort of innovative techniques, you've got to be careful about the language you use, because you're challenging people. And you don't want them to shut down in response, which again relates to culture. So it's about having the culture of a culture of openness and a culture of collaboration and communicativeness that can help you to get through some of these sticky patches. Financial is always going to be an issue. Who pays for it and how? Marketing is a big challenge. There is less so in the big organizations, but I still come across it a lot, is an expectation that the website will be the marketing, and forgetting that you need to tell people about your website or your digital offer, that this has got to happen as a kind of an organic thing. And big challenges around building scale. When you have an audience whose attention is scattered across various parts of the internet, and you have pockets of audience in different places, how do you create something that can build significant scale? Especially, and this harks particularly to TV, when you're working in a broadcast industry who still expect really big numbers overnight. So there is a culture of understanding what success looks like there. So the key ones around here, the sort of creative workflow, skills, roles and responsibilities, and culture are the ones that can make or break a project, can mean whether your project gets off the ground or not. And all of these involve people, and involve people trying to deal with some kind of level of change. And when you try and embark on something like that, you usually get that. So trying to walk into an organisation where people who feel very passionately about their project, who have developed characters and stories and narrative arc, who've got something they really care deeply about and they want to communicate to an audience, and you're coming in telling them you've got to make it A, cool, and B, that you've got to do what you say, it's not going to go down so well. So this is there are plenty of things that people are afraid of in this space, and this is kind of a little call to arms, I suppose, to recognise this. We don't talk about how scared we are when we embark on a project, and most people do. If you're not feeling afraid, my argument is perhaps you're not being brave enough. You're not trying anything stupid enough. But fear of being wrong, fear of losing money, fear of never being commissioned again because you took on this crazy digital maverick person who fucked up your project and it tanked, and now Channel 4 are never going to commission you. Fear of losing face. There's a whole bunch of things. There's a whole bunch of things bundled up in that. And also, don't forget, fear on the part of the digital creatives who are going in there going, oh yeah, I can make this brilliant. Because if we're honest with ourselves and we are genuinely trying to be innovative, then we cannot be certain that what we're going to do is going to make anything a roaring success. What we're going to do is our best. So understanding and recognizing that this can kind of be scary, and approaching that, well, just approaching that, frankly. And just the little note that it can be sneaky. So fear disguises itself as stonewalling, as agreeing to doing something and then not doing it, as frustration, as combativeness. So just recognizing it when you see it, and understanding a little bit about where it comes from can sometimes help you to find a way around it. And this is just sort of my my request for more compassion, really. I've been in too many places where a digital team have gone in and told a producer or a broadcaster, and I've seen this happen on conferences, massive rooms of TV execs, and the digital person stands at the front and tells them that the TV industry is dead, it's a dying model, their jobs are over, they've got to change. And they're not going to welcome you with open arms if you go in with that kind of message. So understanding where these people are coming from, especially if you're going into an industry or an organisation who are new and fresh to working in a digital way, approaching them with compassion, being a little bit kind, being a little bit understanding, taking small steps, take responsibility for what it is you're offering them and being as open and honest as you can be, but giving them responsibility as well. So giving roles, giving participatory roles in your digital projects to people in the organisations you're working with, and thinking about it as in terms of evolution rather than revolution. Sometimes you've just got to go in and do something, but often finding quick wins and baby steps can help you further along the process. So a little bit about project structure and things that we just try and slot in. So everybody has their project structure, and you all know what you're doing, right? You guys are experienced to know what you're doing. So these are things just to think about, notice, and think about where they come and how important they might be. Listening, really key. Going in and not just blah, blah, blahing and bowling somebody over with your amazing idea, but listening as part of your requirements gathering, but you're also listening out for those signs of resistance. Because if you can spot them right at the start when you're requirements gathering, you might be able to find a way around them. Being visible and transparent and documenting what you're doing and sharing all of that. I'm sure you will do it. I've worked with several agencies where in an attempt to make things life easier for everybody else, they'll take something away and work on it and then bring you something and present it, which is actually kind of terrifying from a commissioning point of view. And finding experts and champions within the organisation that you're working with. So within the broadcasting organisation, I sat with the Channel 4 drama team for almost 2 years. And I have no idea how to edit a script to make it awesome. I can read something and tell you if it's good, but I can't tell you how to get from good to amazing. But those commissioning editors can. Absolutely, that's their job. So finding the people in that organisation that you're working with who have the skills to make what you're doing awesome, even if it's just small patches of it, tapping into their areas of expertise to harness their enthusiasm, make them feel involved and empowered, can really transform your project. It means you have champions who want it to succeed as much as you do. Agreeing what success looks like. In a world that still looks at barb measurement, that still looks at overnights, and then looks at weekly viewing figures, because that's kind of as far ahead as they get. That's a very different success measure to a website, a product, an app, which may grow over time and grow organically over time. It's a different expectation over some different viewing patterns that relate to binge viewing box sets. So one of the interesting conversations I have, and I've bored lots of people with this already, is that the people who download House of Cards from Netflix and sit down and watch it in a weekend, is that a greater or a lesser sign of love than people who tune into the same episode of a drama every week for its 6 to 8 week run? So it's kind of the same. It's what you're measuring is an expression of love, of wanting to consume something. And at the moment, if somebody series links a drama series on Channel 4 or any of the series, and then waits until a week after, or more than a week after the last episode has been broadcast, and then sits down and watches it in a weekend with pizzas and donuts and has all their mates around and makes a big deal out of it because they absolutely fucking love it, it's not measured. Different measures from different industries. So trying to communicate what everybody's expectations are and building a shared vision with maybe some numbers or at least some qualitative measures in there as well is really important. Then you're all pointing yourselves at the same thing. And now, this is a bit of a sticky issue because none of us really have enough time. But I just wanted to leave the note that when you're speccing out a project, when you're looking at your timescale or your project schedule, or you're trying to deliver something, particularly for a broadcast deadline, is to remember to leave in a little bit of time in there for relationship building. That fluffy stuff where it feels like maybe you're not actually doing any work and you're starting to panic slightly. If you're bringing everybody along with you and communicating your ideas strongly and with passion, then actually that is kind of work. That's part of the project. There's some big issues around timing and TV production timescales. We're not yet in a world where you can produce a TV series in an agile way, where you deliver one episode and then go away and make the next week's one, and the next week's one, and the next week's one, on the whole. There are some that work that way, but actually they're kind of a rarity, and part of that shtick, part of that this is done every week is part of what their USP is. It's not yet standard industry behavior. And so being able to have some kind of agile development process alongside a much more linear TV process requires a lot of communication and a lot of clarity. Pick off some quick wins. This is just my hot tip, and it's kind of obvious. But if you can deliver some quick wins, small successes, it makes the marathon much easier to do. You will bring people along with you rather than trying to deliver the whole thing in one go. And celebrate your successes and failures. So failure still feels like shit, whether you've got permission to fail or not. It's horrible, but kind of celebrate it. Try and hug that to you as a part of your project at the end of the day. So trying to avoid blame, but also trying to learn from those failures and develop on them. This relates directly to the fear slide earlier on. You know, the failure thing is what people were afraid of most. So recognizing at the end that was what they were afraid of most, and shit, it happened, is actually more honest and will result in a better ongoing working relationship than pretending it never happened, avoiding the issue, brushing it under the carpet, getting drunk and moving on. And hopefully, what I've talked about here involves a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication, a lot of trying to work with your audiences, but also the people that you're working with as people, rather than problems to be solved. And this kind of two-way flow of communication will hopefully build knowledge, enthusiasm, and ambition between both parties, that you will learn a ton from the TV producers or the publishers, whoever it is you're working with, making the future projects a hell of a lot easier. And that was a very, very quick trot through, so feel free to heckle. Thank you.